Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Blockchain Won't Save the World. We've got a very special edition today. This is the Students React edition. We're going to go through 9 of the most well-known blockchain and token use cases in the world, and we're going to get the views of the future leaders of our nations. We're going to get the views of these students around what do they like, what do they find particularly interesting, what are they worried about, what more do they want to know about in terms of some of the most popular blockchain use cases that are out there. I'm super excited. This has taken a long time to pull together. So shout to Erasmus University for coming together to make this happen. Shout to Youri for being our coordinator. And we're going to go straight in. The first case we're going to talk about, it's a big one. We're going to talk about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the largest decentralized cryptocurrency in the world, has a market cap of over $1 trillion at this point in time. And Thomas is going to take us through it. Thomas, give us your pros and cons. What do you think about Bitcoin?
So to me, Bitcoin is a very exciting project because it draws many people, also those without any technical knowledge, into the magical world of cryptocurrencies and blockchain. And as someone who truly believes in the promises of a decentralized and unregulated global currency, I want adoption to become widespread, and I think Bitcoin is doing a fairly good job at this. Besides, it functions as a gateway for many people to start exploring other use cases using the blockchain technology. However, Bitcoin still has some major downsides, one of which is its fluctuating price. While this fluctuation is part of the interest to many, as it can make you very rich, it is difficult for companies to accept payments with a currency that can lose its valuation just as quick. A problem for users that want to pay are the Bitcoin's transaction costs. This transaction fee increases when more people try to pay at the same time. At the time of recording this, any transaction a user does costs them around $15, but this amount was $62 just a few weeks ago. Just imagine buying a coffee for $2 and having to spend an additional $15 for this transaction to go through. This fee would make Bitcoin to pay unusable. These transaction fees go to the people who verify the transaction, the so-called miners, and the miners need to run expensive equipment to do this verification, and thus the fees are an incentive to do so. But this equipment also uses a lot of energy. All miners combined, this power consumption is currently estimated to be around 110 terawatts per year, about as much as the energy consumption of the Netherlands. And so with these issues in mind, I would like to know more about the projects that are being developed to take away these hurdles. One of the projects that I saw coming by is the Lightning Network, which is still heavily under development. It promises to save many of the issues that Bitcoin currently has by taking some of the information off of the blockchain. But the way it currently functions is very confusing, and there is a lot of negativity surrounding the project. Other solutions to these problems come in the form of different currencies. And while these other currencies seem very promising, such as Bitcoin Cash, which is of course based on the Bitcoin protocol, these coins are still rather unknown and will have a harder time driving adoption. So what I would like to know is, what are the best ways to tackling these problems?
Thomas, you've come out swinging, no warm up, love it. Clearly, you know your coins. Appreciate that intro. And honestly speaking, the size, the scale, the robustness of the Bitcoin network is hard to challenge at this point, right? That's why I think it's so popular for a number of different use cases. You've hit the nail on the head in terms of is this an investment? Is this a commodity? Is this a payment vehicle? Right? The costs, the challenges around wallets and wallet management is not necessarily the easiest for the high street. But I think you've hit a lot of nails on the head there. Guy, anybody else in the group want to come in on their thoughts on Bitcoin? Are you interested? Are you worried? Are you hodlers? Are you no coiners? Anyone else feel about this?
Yeah, for me, now Bitcoin is of course very huge, but then I look at a comparison with other coins such as Ethereum and Solana, and I see that the transactions per second that are possible on Bitcoin are extremely low. I know, for example, with Visa, they can handle 1,700 transactions per second, and they're having problems with scalability. Ethereum can handle 10,000, and Solana can handle 50,000. And then I was completely surprised when I heard that Bitcoin could only handle 7 transactions per second. So then I don't completely understand, how is it so valuable now, even though it can do so little in comparison?
That's a really good question. And it's really about, what are you using it for, right? If you're using this for high volume, high throughput, low value payments, not great with that sort of throughput, right? But if you're using it as a store of value, and some people look at gold or silver or palladium or whatever else it is, slightly different story. But you're right to call out, what are the capabilities that we need of this particular network, of this particular platform? If it's speed, probably ain't it. If it's energy efficiency, right? If we're trying to track and immutably capture information about a company's sustainability credentials, not great that we're using kilowatts of energy to be able to record that information, right? Slightly contradictory. Anyone else got anything to say on Bitcoin before we move on to the next? All right, let's get it. Kotaro, you're up next. Shameless plug, this one's about Food Trust. Food Trust connects participants throughout the food chain with the goal of increasing freshness, supply chain efficiency, trust in the provenance and the authenticity of particular products. It is an IBM proposition, so shameless plug from our side, but it is one of the better known food traceability platforms out there. Kotaro, give us your thoughts.
Yes, so IBM Food Trust. Nowadays, when you go to the grocery store, you see products from all over the world. I grabbed an avocado, it's from Mexico, a steak from Argentina, and I recently also learned that Kenya is actually the fourth largest exporter of flowers. So chances are high that when you go to a grocery store and grab fresh flowers, they're from Kenya out of all the places. And yeah, in any case, the food supply chains are becoming increasingly global and thus more complex. And as a result, me as a consumer, I have lots of questions. How transparent are the supply chains? Are the products being accurately traced? How fresh are the products? What's the environmental impact? And but obviously the increasing complexity of the supply chain networks also have an impact on companies. They also care about about reducing waste, longer product shelf lives, making processes more efficient, and ultimately providing safe food. And as I said, IBM Food Trust is simply put a solution to all of these questions that arise due to the increasingly global and complex food supply chain for all stakeholders of the food supply chain, consumer, restaurant, farmers, etc. IBM's blockchain technology provides a perfect platform for safe and secure food transactions and collaboration between different stakeholders along this food supply chain. And so I find the project interesting because food supply is one of the most urgent issues of our generation, obviously. Increasing population, people's standard of life increasing, and so consumption is obviously increasing. And yeah, particularly with respect to increasing the efficiency of the food supply chain and reducing unnecessary waste, which we all know we produce a lot of, I see a lot of potential in this project. And so what I would like to know more about this project is, one, what's actually the net environmental impact of the project? Yes, I believe in the technology making processes more efficient, but I also heard a lot about the energy intensive nature of blockchain. And I was wondering if it's really worth it. And then another question I had is, I'm not that familiar with the blockchain technology itself. So I was wondering, what is it that makes blockchain different from previous technologies? And why is it that blockchain in particular is allowing this whole thing to happen? And yeah, that's my question.
Great points there, and Kotaro, I think you've raised some of the issues that some of the clients or the organizations that work in food provenance are struggling with. Is how can we track that a product has come from locally sourced, or how can we identify when we have an issue with contamination that we can track back where that product has come from? One of the original use cases was from a very large food retailer that said, find me the origin of this packet of mangoes. Right, just to understand if I had to do a recall or something like that around a particular product, how long would it take? And it took them more than 6 days to find where in the world that particular packet came from. And if you're trying to sort of source back food freshness or source back a contamination, you've got to do that quickly. Increasingly, though, I think we're seeing a lot of regulation around food or around other industries where similar capability is useful, is to be able to trust the data around how many miles was it carried, what type of transport, what was the carbon footprint of a particular product. And you don't necessarily want that information to be from a centralized database that a company can publish by itself for trust purposes, of course. Also, a supply chain is complex. You've got lots of first, second, and third tier suppliers, and you've got to aggregate all of that information up because it's in lots of different places. In some cases, it may be held on manual reports. If you look at the coffee supply chain, it's not particularly digitized in some places. A lot of things there. We're probably not going to get time to go into the how do blockchains work. A big point around the energy efficiency around the platforms, though, is the difference between the type of consensus algorithm. So are we using proof of work, which Bitcoin and Ethereum and others traditionally have used, which are based around validating transactions with computation? which takes a lot of energy because you're using computing power to do it, opposed to proof of stake or proof of authority or other type of networks, which have much lower computing power requirement, or just identify that a participant on the network is who they say they are because they're hosting a node. So it's easier to see. All in all, though, some important issues, and it's great that this group cares about this particular topic. Anyone else want to come in on food provenance as the topic or traceability? Any other thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, Anthony, you mentioned, for example, in the case of a product recall and in case there's a contamination somewhere in the supply chain, I was wondering how exactly would Food Trust help determine where that contamination took place?
So the question might not be about where, but it's about tracing back what. So if you've got a store that's full of 60,000 packets of mango that may have come from a number of different geographies or different jurisdictions or different suppliers, if you've got a particular batch that you know comes from one supplier or one type of mango or one particular delivery, you can start working back and deducing it. If you don't have any traceability of those products at all, if you're literally only looking at purchase orders and then what's in stock, there's a whole gap in the middle around where did all of these things come from? As Kotaro said, we're sourcing products and flowers and leafy greens and fish from all around the world. It's just going to appear as fish when we get to the counter. But as a retailer or as a brand, you need to know where that's come from to be able to trace it back.
Then I have one more question. Now, I definitely see the benefit to consumers and retailers to ensure that their product is fresh. But what incentive is there, for example, for farmers to join this network?
That's a really good question. And ultimately, it's got to come down to value or participation. In some cases, in certain regulated industries, this is mandatory, right? Less so for farmers and agriculture, but at certain points, you need to source that you're using particular types of material, identify where it's come from to be able to report to a regulator. In terms of food, less so, but there's got to be an incentive for the farmer to participate. So it's either that they're going to get greater business because they're able to contribute to the transparency. A retailer is more likely to work with those parties or want to source from those parties where they can trace back, because either that's part of their consumer promise, it's helps them to understand their net zero position. But the challenge there is not necessarily that there's something in it for the farmer, because repeat business or working with large regular suppliers is a good thing. It's actually, where does the investment come from to invest behind the technology, even whether it's mobile or cloud-based, or even whether it's just uploading a CSV file from their computer. Is there 3G where they're working, right? Do they have that sort of technology and mobility on the farm? Not always. And I often use Visa and MasterCard as an analogy here, is that we have these touchless point of sale terminals in the places we shop now, not because the customers demanded it, or not because the customers paid for it, and not because the retailers necessarily wanted it there. It lowers the cost of transaction for Visa and MasterCard. It reduces the friction, but they paid a lot for those retailers to have those machines in the stores. So when you're thinking about scaling a network like Food Trust or Food Provenance, actually some of the investment likely comes from those who benefit the most, which is the retailers. So the incentive model or the investment case actually comes from further upstream to invest downstream in enabling their supply chains. We're going to move on. We spent a lot of time on food provenance, and I'm desperate to get to the next one. This is going to be a double team. So we've got Vibhav and Pawan coming together to talk about Dogecoin. Vibhav, lead us in.
Yeah, so Dogecoin, of course, we can't have a discussion about blockchain without mentioning Dogecoin in 2021. So it really blurs the line between the virtual world of the internet and the real world. So as Thomas mentioned, one thing that's specifically interesting about Dogecoin is that it shows that anybody can get in contact with blockchain and cryptocurrency in general. So it allows the technology, not just Dogecoin, but the technology as a whole to grow for a new audience, especially the youth. However, I'm a bit more skeptical about its practicality, especially as an economics student, because when I was preparing for the podcast, I naturally thought about how cryptocurrencies are challenging the very fundamental role of currency in the economy and what the emerging world of finance might look like. And I really tried to imagine a world where cryptocurrencies completely take over existing forms of money, the so-called fiat currencies, and there are only decentralized cryptocurrencies. And that's where my point of confusion lies, outside the world of speculative trading and hype assets, and more in the real life applications of cryptocurrency, in a world where crypto achieves its goal of replacing fiat money. Because as an economic student, I think I can see multiple issues. So for example, the currencies we have now provide some sort of consistent store of value, unlike cryptocurrencies that tend to fluctuate a lot, which makes it easier for businesses as well as people to operate, and it keeps people's wealth relatively stable. And also central banks currently regulates circulation of currency to control inflation, interest rates, and other economic factors, which would not be possible without cryptos. And finally, something related to Dogecoin. Since everyone can have their own currency now, and everybody can just create their own currency, this can lead to a lack of structure and lack of stability, which I'm not sure how it would fit in the economy. So yeah, that's sort of my take on Dogecoin.
Some really thoughtful points, and that's probably one for a podcast in and of itself. Thank you so much, Vibhav, for doing your research. And there's a lot to it. The fact that you've got Dogecoin as a cryptocurrency that's currently valued at something about $69 billion, right? Mm-hmm. $69 billion, and it was intended as a joke, right? It was a meme coin. It was a copy of Bitcoin that somebody wanted to create. It was an IBM and an Adobe employee at the very beginning saying, you know what, we're just going to launch it. We're going to put out a white paper. We love memes. We love Doge. Let's just put it out there and see what happens. And it became adopted by the developer community, by probably the West Coast US kind of contingent, and then latterly Elon. And now look at us. Pawan, I want you to come in on this one. Any other thoughts to build on what Vibhav has already said?
Yeah. So as we all know, Dogecoin has gone to the moon with a market cap of around $70 billion, which is absolutely insane for a meme. It is understandable, however, because people can only buy what they know, and when they saw, and it has been sort of a snowball effect. Like when Elon Musk tweeted first about it, the coin increased in value, people became more known, and more people stepped in, which even more increases the value, and more people, and it has a snowball effect, and it has been caught up by the mainstream media, and it's now really big. So the network effects stepped in, just like with Bitcoin, I would say. So personally, I think that in the end, a lot of people might end up losing money, but we will see. However, Dogecoin cannot be seen as an asset because there's 4% inflation built into the system. So the value of the currency will fall if people stop buying, and the value will remain stable. For the value, in order for the value to remain stable, people need to keep buying this coin, this means that it is not attractive for people to keep their money in this currency. So people will rather put their money in things like Bitcoin or even Litecoin. However, it is interesting is that a lot of people looked at the tweets of Elon Musk or Snoop Dogg and bought some Doge, and they become interested in cryptos in general and started going down the rabbit hole of cryptocurrencies, decentralized finance project, and more. I've seen countless people who started with Dogecoin and continued their path in cryptos on Reddit. So I think for this reason that Dogecoin could have a net positive effect on the cryptocurrency industry, as long as not too many people lose money if Dogecoin ends up falling. However, something that's also possible, and I want to know more about this, Dogecoin has become more and more known by everyone, and therefore could it be possible for the community to upgrade the technology behind this coin to make it more usable?
I think it's a really interesting point. And your point around branding or people being able to relate to the products or the cryptos they get behind, a lot of the names out there are largely meaningless, but to be able to have the people get behind a meme or something that's immediately recognizable is so fun and interesting and a bit different. I think that's really interesting as guidance for future cryptos. In terms of could they upgrade the technology, I'd be interested to know what would be the capabilities you think it needs to improve upon, or what would be different. Protocols obviously are designed to be relatively standardized, hence the name protocol. But what do you think is missing, or what would you change? Let me jump you off mute for a sec.
Yes. So with every block, 10,000 Dogecoins are being created. So for the value to remain stable, people need to keep buying this coin. And it sounds more like a pyramid scheme than a real asset. So that's what I thought.
That's an interesting point. I think we'll have to take that one away and do a little bit of research, whether that was deliberately designed to keep momentum Or as long as there was momentum and interest, the crypto stays alive, as opposed to it being, a genuinely thought through financial instrument. But I think it's super interesting. Vibhav, Pawan, thank you so much for your thoughts on the Doge. Again, that's one that we could do a podcast on by itself. We're going to move on to the next one now, and we're going to talk about Voatz. Voatz allows mobile voting as well as users to verify that their vote was cast on a secure tamper-proof ledger, and reduces the likelihood of voter fraud. Ozan, coming at us live from Georgia. Tell us about Voatz and your thoughts.
Yes, thank you. Perfect summary, first, Anthony. It was a good summary. And now the reason why I chose Voatz was almost everywhere around the world, voting systems and elections are either fraudulent or at least accused of fraud. And for example, in the past US election, Trump created an uproar regarding the mail-in balloting system and demanded to recount multiple states. And he stated that some votes were either lost during the process, tampered with, or even people who weren't eligible to vote voted. And the implementation of Voatz would solve all of these problems. It's a blockchain design voting service. And how it works, the user downloads the Voatz app, they verify their phone number, provide a photo ID. In the US, also their social security number, a selfie to verify that it's actually them. So it's probably more safer than the real world. And generally what they're trying to do is making voting not only more accessible and secure, but also transparent and traceable. Why I believe Voatz is so important is the pandemic really highlighted desperate need for better voting options. For example, even in the United States, especially voters with disabilities, elderly, sick people, all of these people with lack of access to ballots during every single election. This problem has been existent, and COVID-19 has only aggravated it, in my opinion. So, of course, there are also dangers. It is already being actively used, for example, in West Virginia during some elections. And MIT researchers, however, have found out weaknesses that could potentially allow hackers to, alter, stop, and expose how individuals voted, and explain that there is limited transparency within the system. Of course, Anthony, you probably know more as IBM was a pioneer of the technology. And I have a question for you, Anthony. Do you really believe that it is feasible for an entire nation to vote over a mobile application? I mean, this presumes that every eligible voter would also have access to a mobile phone and internet access. Do you see any problems with this?
That is the ultimate question, Ozan, and thank you for a really great introduction, some very deep thoughts. My view is that you are constantly trading off accessibility with security. It's got to be equitable. Any technology solution, any solution, let's call it, that the answer here is to allow people to have their vote heard and for it to be recognized and recorded in a way that can't be disputed. That's going to be challenging when your primary solution is only smartphone based, because your assumption is that everybody has a smartphone or has access to a smartphone. If you have part of the population who don't have access to a smartphone, what's the journey for them? How are we going to manage a digital journey? It's not impossible, right? The underlying platform for recording and verifying could well be front-ended by paper, could be front-ended by mobile, could be front-ended by web. But in all of those cases, you just got to make sure that it's equitable and secure. The further, and it cuts both ways, right? A physical person turning up, having a physical verification that they are who they say they are with a secondary form of identification with a fingerprint scan, the more things you add on, the more likely you are to believe that that person is who they say they are. Digital technology can enable the same sort of thing, right? We have mobile devices with biometric checks, but at the same time, you can have devices emulated. You can have hacks, and enable some sort of defrauding in some way, shape, or form. Do we want 100% certainty in our system, or are we okay with 98% certainty, as opposed to claims of voter fraud of 50% of votes being out of? This is the challenge for those people administrating these sorts of systems or these sorts of solutions. And the hard thing is whichever way you turn, there's a compromise and a trade-off. So it's tricky, but thanks for that one. Anybody else want to come in on Voatz and blockchain-based voting as a concept? Any other thoughts?
Yeah. I thought that I think people will be even more skeptical about blockchain voting than regular voting, because I can't see populists or even the elder population who doesn't even know what blockchain is to accept this form of voting, because for them something digital is already like hackable, and even though blockchain is supposed to be secure. So I'm not sure how much people will trust this process as a form of the democratic process that we have.
Good point. And frankly, you've got to ask the question is, what is it that the citizens need to know about the system? Where the information is captured, right? The ledger that sits underneath, or whatever protocols are used to validate that a vote hasn't been cast twice. Whether that's in cloud, whether that's in a database, whether that's somebody filtering through pieces of paper and making a check mark. Most voters don't really know that. What they typically engage with is the front end, the interface. So if I'm doing it online and there's a number of challenge questions or check questions, or I log in with an ID that I have the password to, as a voter, I don't really know what happens after that. Question is, if you're deliberately going out with a brand saying our voting process is blockchain enabled, therefore it's trusted, that's not necessarily a particularly accurate statement. So it's a good call out, very good call out. And again, one that I have put out an entire episode on actually, but I'll link that one in the description, because again, it's worth spending some time to get to know the issues of that one, because it's not cut and dry. All right, next up, we're going to move on to Diem, or the artist formerly known as Libra, Facebook's cryptocurrency. Alex, you're going to take us through this one.
Yes, thank you. So what I thought is really interesting about this topic is just how cryptocurrency is brought to the normal consumer, as the finance forms just become much more digital. For example, we could transfer some Libra over WhatsApp maybe someday. But on the other hand, it also brings up many, many concerns that I would like to talk about later. First of all, as we all know, Libra or Diem was created by Facebook, but it will not only be governed by Facebook. Many big organizations like eBay, Uber, MasterCard, Visa, PayPal, they all will govern Libra together. So this is the first big difference from Bitcoin, the centralization aspect. This means Bitcoin is fully decentralized, as we know. But as I already mentioned, Libra will be controlled by it's called Libra Association, which is made up from these big players. And also, which is really interesting, is that Libra is actually backed by a proper government currency. So in this case, it's dollar, euro, pound, and yen. But Bitcoin, for example, is not backed by any government currency or any value. And also what I think is really interesting, as we already mentioned it earlier, is that the transactions with Libra will be much quicker than with Bitcoin. It's here 1,000 transactions every second, which is quite remarkable. But as I already said, many concerns have been raised. For instance, that Facebook's Libra will undermine central banks in the future. And also what I think is very worrying is that we already have these big players which have a lot of power regarding our data and so on. And now just the thought about them taking over our financial markets and our financial regulations, I think it's a bit worrying, but I think you might know more about it.
I think this is another one that we've chosen that's deliberately contentious, right? Is do we trust Facebook or a consortium of large tech or large cap companies to govern appropriately a method of digital payment? And the answer is not sure, right? I mean, straight out of the gate, a number of regulators said, not on our watch, right? We don't think that this is good for if the power of the social network and the amount of currency flows that could go through it. Now they moved it away from some of the original principles. Anchoring it in existing currencies means that they have to hold deposits or have to hold certain amounts of those core currencies, so you don't have quite as much of an inflationary or deflationary effect. But it's still a social network that has visibility on transaction data. You can argue that today Visa and MasterCard have those things. You can argue that a number of banks have those information about you that they can infer certain things. MasterCard has a consulting business based purely on using the data that it has about payments. How do we feel about Facebook doing such a thing? These are the questions. Any other thoughts from the group on this one? Because I realized this is one of the ones that I think straight out of the gate was one of the most contentious ever. Anyone else had any thoughts on Libra or Diem?
Yeah. I was thinking, just talking principally, or just considering the decentralization principle of cryptocurrencies, doesn't centralizing a currency go against the very point of why cryptocurrencies were introduced in the first place?
really good question. And this is one that what's your take on this, right? There are people out there who will say anything that isn't in line with Satoshi's original vision is bunk and doesn't have validity in the world, which is one end of a spectrum. The other end of a spectrum is to say these are digital capabilities. What we're looking to enable is fast, low cost transactions between parties around the world, right? Whether that is decentralized or whether it is just efficient. But what cost does it come at? Or what is the trade-off for you as a user, as a citizen, as a customer? It's somebody else has data about you. Somebody else has a bigger picture piece of data about what you're doing and what you're up to. How do you feel about that? Would you rather transact in Doge or Bitcoin or Monero or whatever else if it was as easy to do, if it was as low cost, if there were no fees? How would you feel about that? So I think that's it. There's no right answer here, right? It's all trade-offs. It's all degrees of centralization, security, privacy that we're toying with. Anyone else have any thoughts on this one before we jump on?
I would have one more point, because I think that the fact that it's actually backed up by real money and proper value, I think this makes the implementation of such a coin much more realistic than Bitcoin or Dogecoin or Ethereum. So I think that it's actually something that is really realistic to implement and that it could happen in a few years.
I agree. And I think it will in whatever form it does. What they have is an installed base. When you're looking for network effects or to scale a platform, your existing installed base of users is critical. And if you look at Facebook, maybe it's not the social media power it once was, but you've got access to a lot of users. And if you make it easy, if you embed it in WeChat, or if you embed it in WhatsApp or wherever you want to put it, you've got access and you make things easy. We're going to jump on to another one. We've picked, again, another pretty contentious one here. Brian's up next. We're going to talk about digital health passes, the concept of using blockchain to help issue and store and verify digital credentials relating to your health. In this particular case, or the most kind of recent application of this, is for COVID health credentials, vaccine certificates, test certificates, proof of recovery. Brian, take us away.
Well, after more than a year going out in and out of lockdowns, I mean, we've all lived it. A way out finally seems to be on the horizon. With the COVID-19 vaccines that have been developed at an incredibly fast pace, now the countries are rushing to inoculate the vaccines, and more people are returning to their workplaces, and venues that have been shut for months are finally reopening. So with all that hope, how do we make sure that individuals comply with the health guidelines that make sure that we're safe and that the virus doesn't keep propagating? The Digital Health Pass, developed by IBM, is a digital wallet designed to enable businesses to verify health credentials for employees and customers entering their location according to the criteria that they set. The product is specifically designed for industries that we've been craving to go back to, such as the travel and transportation and sports and entertainment industries. So it provides hope that we'll soon be able to go back to stadiums and concerts, and we're all very excited about this. But one thing that is really important about health data is that it's so sensitive. So privacy is truly key. Thanks to the blockchain architecture of the Digital Health Pass, it is transparent, secure, and impossible to tamper with. So that's what makes it such a great tool to go out of this pandemic. But I have some doubts about how IBM, as a for-profit organization, manages its role in this Digital Health Pass relationships with other stakeholders, such as governments in particular. And I also have doubts about how people will react to the Digital Health Pass, especially considering how paranoid people may have been around the virus and the vaccines, refusing to get the vaccine in so many instances. So how can IBM convince people to trust that their very sensitive health data is not stored on its servers, and that blockchain actually makes it trustable and transparent?
Really, really good intro, Brian. I think you've captured a number of the issues around this. I mean, first things first, are we comfortable having digital credentials at all? Are we happy with the policy requirements to carry a certificate, whether it was paper or digital, to validate that we have been vaccinated, that we have been tested? Can't we just get along without having, can we do a policy only approach that doesn't need technology? In some cases, or at this particular point in time, a lot of governments or a lot of regional governments or government agencies say, actually, no, we need to be able to check this. We need to have some digital verification because it relates to immigration. It relates to people, getting on planes coming from different countries around the world. And at the moment, there isn't trust. There isn't trust that those the immunity levels are under control. There isn't trust that we can open society and the virus will be under control, or that it's not going to have a negative effect. Right? That's a really big point to start with. Full disclosure. I mean, we've talked about IBM's Digital Health Pass as a brand, but there are a number of others out there. IATA has one. Common Pass has one. You've got the likes of Clear, Credify in Singapore. There's probably a mix of about 5 to 10 private sector or private providers of wallet technology. And back to your point around who looks after this or who manages this, typically that will then be deployed to government agencies, or whether that's the Ministry of Health or another particular agency. Typically speaking, it will be hosted in their cloud, and the solution will be managed by, it will be their infrastructure to control, as opposed to it being private sector servers capturing data, right? That's not the point at all. This is a solution of which governments or agencies or private sector organizations can avail of. The point next is why should I trust this? Why is this important? First things first, carrying paper around is pretty inefficient as a process, right? Not great. If you're trying to go through an airport and you're having 10,000 people physically showing a piece of paper and verifying that, firstly, is this paper verifiable? Secondly, is it fast? And can it be shared in advance of arriving? The other thing is you don't want 10,000 people gathering in a queue when you've got a pandemic. Right? Not exactly an efficient process. So that's a big part of it. How that then integrates into booking journeys. If you're going to a football match or if you're going to the theater, you don't necessarily want those same 10,000 people queuing in advance. So how can we embed that into the technology? The integration part of it is critically important. I think it has to be equitable first and foremost, right? Not everybody will be vaccinated. Not everybody will be able to be vaccinated. So if we are going down the route of having verifiable credentials, how do we make sure that this is possible to be used by citizens who don't have smartphones? Back to the point we had from Ozan around voting. You got the same challenges around, if this has to be available for everybody, can we allow a paper journey for somebody who doesn't have a smartphone? Of course we can. Is this going to be 100% foolproof for everybody all the time? Probably not, for the same reasons we talked about with voting. Right? That's going to be particularly challenging too. And then ultimately it comes down to how long do we need this for? Right? Nobody really, and where do we apply it? Nobody wants to see people scanning into coffee shops, right? That's just a horrible experience that I don't think anybody wants to have to go through. But for things like major events, for international travel, for a period of time where we're trying to get this under control, how do we make sure that it's easy, that we've got common standards like W3C verifiable credentials? The information that sits on the blockchain will never be PII, must never be PII, is not PII. It's more information around the particular schemas that are being used to be able to identify the keys that have signed the credentials and any revocation. So any particular keys that have been cancelled because they've been hacked in some cases, or they may have been hacked, or they've been compromised, or they've been rotated, and or that there's a revocation list of particular credentials that have not become, or that are not valid, or that maybe have been found to be fraudulent, or that a particular batch of a vaccine is found to have gone wrong. There's a lot to this, and I've spent a lot of time talking about it. I want to come in. Anybody else got thoughts on the concept of digital health credentials or this particular space at the moment?
Yeah, I think this isn't even more challenging than the voting thing, because voting is country specific. But as you mentioned, with the traveling all over the world, countries will need to work together with this health pass. And while passports are very standardized and every country knows them and uses them, in such a technology, every country needs to accept this digital health pass that one country uses. And as it's implemented by a government, I can see some challenges arising there.
100%. And this is one of the most, if not the most significant digital transformation challenge of our time, in terms of getting 180 or 210 or whichever number you choose, countries to agree a standard for something that we all need to use all of the time, right? And to do that within 12 months is frankly remarkable. So the technology integration challenge, the policy, and then the data and the certificate standards has been significant. But the positive that I've seen is that actually you're seeing public-private partnerships spinning up in every country about this, because we all need to work fast. And that learning about governments agreeing and working together, different competitors agreeing and working together, right? The Good Health Pass Initiative and a number of others where you've seen competitive propositions all working to align standards, and then governments and private sector working together to deploy things safely and quickly. Those are really great examples that we can take to other sectors or other use cases. Hopefully, when all of this goes away, there's some really important learnings around how do we deploy technology quickly at speed and scale. So I think there's some positives at least. We're going to move on to the next one, and we've got Mo, who's going to talk about Brave. Brave is the internet browser that's designed to espouse and provide privacy, which for different reasons people need a lot of the time. But Mo, I'm going to let you talk through it and give us some more details, please.
Yeah, exactly. So Brave is based on privacy, as we all face now that issue nowadays. So everyone is looking for more privacy, a more secure browsing environment, and Brave is providing that. So that's pretty good. But also it kind of implemented a new idea, which is over the cryptocurrency world into the system, which is provided the rewarding system with the Brave attention token, which is also from Brave. So it rewards the content creators with these tokens, but also like you could. So normally we see our ads whether we liked it or not. You see ads everywhere, and also they share your data, so whether also you liked it or not. But with Brave, you have the option to choose whether you would like to see the ad or not. But also if you see an ad, so it's only between you, the advertiser, and Brave, so it doesn't go to any other parties outside of this. But you also get rewarded for that. So that's it's a good idea to make the adoption of cryptocurrency more bigger and wider, and also for the company as well. But a few issues are arising is that I came across that there were some data leaked for browsers using the Tor mode to get into the dark and deep web. So these were exposed for several months without knowing that, because of a bug in the Brave browser. So that's some of the issues. Sometimes they have these bugs, which is so it's causing the data leaks. It has been several times, I believe, that happened. So in general, so I'm worried more about these bugs all happening constantly, every now and then. But other than that, it's all actually good, and they're still like improving the browser, adding more features to it, which is now you can also access to some of your wallets in the browser itself, which is also a good feature, I think. But the most importantly was that making adoption of blockchain and cryptocurrency wider using these features, which is pretty dope, actually.
That's high praise. And honestly, I think that's a particular challenge around a lot of these protocols or emerging technologies is, how do we know it's stable? How do we know that it is actually private? I mean, frankly speaking, it can't be much less private than some of the alternatives, frankly. But I don't know, anybody else use Brave browser? Anybody else had an experience with privacy-based browsing? Keep it clean, this is a family show, but anybody else had any experience or thoughts around this as a particular concept, or around the deliberate monetization, or at least the transparent monetization of your browsing activity?
I haven't personally used Brave, but I saw that there's some sort of a reward program of which you can select which creators you financially can benefit. Now, I'm not sure if I fully understand, because I'm thinking, do those creators have to have some kind of relation to Brave to actually benefit from the Brave browser? Otherwise, it would simply seem to me that you're just browsing incognito and they don't receive anything at all. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like they'd probably have some sort of affiliation in the same way you have, Twitch streamers attached to a platform. Brave content creators can sign up, and the more you get, I guess, the harder it is to find them. But Mo.
Yeah, they have like the program, so they give you a link if you're a content creator, whether on YouTube or Twitch or even Twitter, I believe. So they give you a link which you can provide it with your fans, or if you have some followers, they can use it for 30 days, and after 30 days, you get the rewards. So the Brave then gives you the rewards that these users have used your link for 30 days. So the browser, I mean, in this case. So that's that's how the creators get rewarded. Nice. Or if someone wants to reward you, so send you a tip with that. That's also possible.
Nice. That's a nice build. Thank you so much for that, Mo. And We've got one more to go. I'm conscious we need to get through the whole lot, and we've finished the show with Youri. Youri, we're going to talk a little bit about Vegan Nation. Vegan Nation is a marketplace specifically for vegan-friendly goods and services with its own native cryptocurrency, Vegan Pay. Does the Vegan Nation need its own crypto? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, just quickly before I start, I want to thank the people from Erasmus Tech community to help set this up, specifically Ozan, Vibhav, Bryan, who are here, as well as Ava, who could not make it. But yeah, with regards to Vegan Nation, I found it a very interesting concept, and there's a lot to say. So, but I'm going to try and keep it brief. First, the CEO, Isaac Thomas, he said that the term Vegan Nation was self-explanatory. I found that quite confusing, but then he says that's just what it is. It's a vegan nation. There's 75 million vegans in the world, and Vegan Nation is kind of an objective to try and get them all together under the guise of a nation. And the nation to them is something that has a shared currency, economy, and often a shared language and culture. There are some things there that I think are a bit hazy. What exactly makes a nation? But if you look at simply the currency and the economy, then I can definitely see that aspect in Vegan Nation. So why would vegans need, for example, a shared economy? Well, if you look at the economy, there's a lot of vegan industries. There's vegan cosmetics or food, clothing. So there's a whole aspect where vegans would like to get involved without contributing to non-vegan causes. For example, if you have a $100 bill, you don't know if that bill was previously spent on non-vegan products. And with Vegan Coin or Vegan Pay, you can be certain that it's only used for vegan products. Now, my concern there is how do you ensure that the Vegan Coin profits are only used towards vegan-oriented goals? In that regard, I don't see the real difference between fiat currencies. Even if you buy a vegan product, if the producer still makes non-vegan goods, they could still use that revenue for non-vegan goals. So they have created this payment platform, this app, with which you can find nearby vegan locations and make sure to pay there. So I do find that very interesting. They also talk about rewarding good behavior. At least that's in terms of what Isaac Thomas said. I'm not quite sure what he means by good behavior and who determines what good behavior would be, but I assume it's towards their goal of creating a more vegan world. They actually have a goal of by 2026, having everyone in the world be vegan, which I find really ambitious. I mean, I definitely see a lot of growth in the number of people who are going vegan or are more environmentally conscious with their eating and consuming, but to reach that goal by 2026 seems very ambitious. Another concern I have with using blockchain in this regard is there's a lot of criticism with regards to how environmentally friendly cryptocurrencies can be, at least now. And I know that they're very involved in a lot of environmental projects, including in the Amazon. So to me, it seems kind of a dichotomy. Are they trying to help the environment, but are they doing it in a way that might seem not environmentally friendly to some? And then would a lot of vegans even be willing to join if they are concerned about the environmental consequences of using blockchain in this method of consuming?
Really interesting points, Youri. And the same question you could apply to Doge, you could apply to any other cryptos that are out there is, does this community, does this group of individuals need its own native currency? You could argue that even with Bitcoin, the community that gets behind the values of Bitcoin as decentralized, tamper-proof, stateless crypto is something that hundreds of millions of people worldwide have got behind, whether that's because they believe it has a purpose or because the technology has a value in and of itself, the digital capabilities behind it. Does the Vegan Nation need its own cryptocurrency? Is there value in that? Is there utility in using that as a regular method of payment or as a method of exchange across borders? Interesting question. Anybody else want to comment on this one before we close?
Yeah, just building on Youri's ending thoughts. I just think that I can't get over the irony that they are introducing a cryptocurrency which has huge carbon emissions and huge environmental costs, and at the same time they're promoting veganism to achieve environmental goals. So I think that's something which I'm not really sold on, and I think it's a bit ironic.
Well, I think you got to check on the consensus algorithm or consensus mechanism that they're using. If they are using proof of work, valid concern. If they're using proof of stake or any other form of consensus mechanism that's lower in terms of computing power, or at least comparable to a payments network like Visa or MasterCard, that's an open one. I think we've got to take that one away and research it. I'll try and put the answer in the comments. If anyone else can find out what is their consensus mechanism, we'll bring that back so that the audience can figure it out.
One more thing I would like to add to that. For example, like fine, blockchain, at least in its infancy, might have been very environmentally unfriendly. But I mean, so are a lot of different technologies. When we first got cars, they were extremely polluting, and now we're working towards more electric vehicles. So I'm seeing maybe in the future blockchain development and being way more efficient and having much smaller environmental impacts. So even if it isn't perfect now with vegan coin or vegan pay, then in the future maybe it'll be much less of a concern for the environmental impact of such a currency.
Very good point. And again, the technology has evolved, broadly speaking, over the last 10 years to where it is now, and there's more to come. As Youri said, I want to give a huge shout out to Erasmus Tech, Erasmus University, to all of the guys who joined us on the show today. These are the future leaders of our nations. These are their views on blockchain technology, some of the more interesting use cases out there. Shout to Kotaro, Mo, Pawan, Thomas, Ozan, Youri, Bryan, Alex, and Vibhav. Some really, really well-researched thoughts, some really deep insights. And again, really, really impressed with your guys' passion and the input you've put into this. So thank you for joining me on the show. Have a great rest of your week. Keep studying, keep researching, and looking forward to seeing you guys again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having us, Anthony.
Thank you.
It was really nice. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.